Depending on the processing speed and power of your Mac, when you load up a project with too many plugins or software instruments, you might run out of CPU power. In this movie, we'll learn how you can use the Freeze Tracks feature to manage this when your project is at its most processing-intensive state, the mix. You can view at any time how much processing power your project is eating up by clicking on the left-hand side of the LCD and choosing Custom Display. In Custom Display, on the right here, we see some status bars indicating our CPU load and our hard drive load. Let's hit play and see where it lands on the meters. I'll go into the song a little bit.
Settle down real soon. Oh, love, I see you up in the air, love. I know how much you care, love, but if you stay up there for...
Now, right when I hit play, we saw the hard drive load jumped up a bunch and then settled down a little bit, and the CPU was getting almost near halfway up the status bar. So we're not hitting these meters too hard in this case. This is a pretty powerful computer, and the plugins and software instruments were only taxing our system about half as much as it could handle. But if the information were to read at the very top of the meters, and even go all the way to the top, don't worry, your computer won't blow up or anything. The playback will just stop, and you receive a message that the CPU usage is too high. Some plugins tax our CPU usage more than others, notably Space Designer and Sculpture. Here's some tips to help you if your computer is not able to keep up with all the software instruments and plugins you're using. Now that we're in the mixing stage of our project, we can increase our CPU power a little bit by going to the Global Preferences under Audio. Now here we have the I/O buffer size. Right now it's low at 128 samples. We can actually give ourselves some more CPU processing power by opening this up and turning it to 1024. You notice when I did that, our resulting latency went up to 48.4 milliseconds. That's way too high for recording, but since we're in the mixing stage of our project, we can leave it at a high buffer size and it'll give us a little more processing power to work with. Another word about latency. It refers to the time delay of your audio that computer processing causes. Now, some plugins, especially the ones that require more processing power, induce different latencies on your track. This can cause phase issues in the general time smearing of your mix. In other words, all instruments are not outputting exactly on time if you have different plugins on their tracks. But luckily, Logic has a way to deal with this called latency compensation. To see that, in the Preferences, we can go to the General tab, and here it says Plugin Latency, and compensation is currently set to All. That means plugin latency has already been working for us, and Logic was already compensating for the latency on our plugins and our tracks. This is good to leave on when you're mixing, but you might want to think about turning it off when recording, just to cause any further complications, although I haven't seen any problems with leaving it on all the time. Let's close the Preferences. Another way you can conserve system usage in your mix is by using a cool technique in Logic called track freezing. Track freezing works by rendering a temporary audio file version of your track on your hard drive. When playback occurs, Logic simply reads the file instead of doing the complex real-time processing. This conserves a lot of processing power. Let's check out how this works. We'll make a track freeze on the Bosendorfer Grand Piano track. Now to enable track freeze view, right-click on a track header and go to Configure Track Header. Now here we want to show the freeze button. It was currently deactivated. Click Done. Now in all of our tracks, we get a snowflake icon. That's our freeze track button. So if I click that, this track is about to be frozen. If I hit return to go to the beginning of the song, and I'll hit play, and what Logic will do is it'll bounce down and freeze the information of this track and write that temporary file to our hard drive. I'll hit play. Right now, Logic is going through and freezing that track. Takes a second. Great, so this track is now frozen, and all the plugins on this track, which once were using up valuable processing power, now have been written to a temporary file. And if I hit play, we can hear the piano, and it sounds the same. Go back into the song here. So the only drawback of freezing tracks is now if I wanted to make an adjustment in one of our plugins, you can see I'm actually blocked out. I can't access the plugins. I get the little buster sign over my mouse, and I can't click on them. Nothing happens. If I decide that I do want to unfreeze the track, it's no problem. I can just uncheck the snowflake. Then I have access. Say I want to add a high-pass filter or something like that. No problem. I add it, and then I can refreeze the track. The only problem is now I have to sit when I hit play and wait for that whole process to go again where it bounces down and writes that real-time file. But keep in mind, you can freeze many tracks at the same time and then hit play and it'll freeze all those tracks together. So for bigger mixes, conserving processing power using freeze tracks might be an essential part of your workflow, and it might make it work better for your computer if it's struggling to hold up with all the awesome software synths and plugins you've got going on. Really, processing power is your only limitation when it comes to working in Logic, and freeze tracks lets you work around that limitation.